fascinating things occurred at this year's CPAC, which is the conference for conservatives, of course, and there were very few people who were willing to criticize Donald Trump or the Trump administration during this conference. However, there was one long-term conservative or long-time conservative who spoke about Trump on a panel regarding feminism, which I would imagine would be a strange topic to discuss at CPAC. But nonetheless, Mona Charen is on this panel, and she was one of the few conservatives who actually called Trump out on the issue of sexual misconduct. Now, she said, and I quote, I am disappointed in people on our side for being hypocrites about sexual harassers and abusers of women who are in our party, who are sitting in the White House, who brag about their extramarital affairs, who brag about mistreating women, and because he happens to have an R next to his name, we look the other way. Now she says that, and a couple people in the audience, well, sound like more than just a couple, start booing her. But she was undeterred. She continued the criticisms. Take a look.
This is a party that was ready to endorse, the Republican Party endorsed Roy Moore for the Senate in the state of Alabama, even though he was a credibly accused child molester. You cannot claim that you stand for women and put up with that.
Well, you know, this is a really interesting point because there's been this and there are many, but there's been this explosion of sexual harassment scandals, and in many cases, accusation has been equal to conviction.
So that was a response from the moderator, and it is what you usually hear from conservatives who will go ahead and criticize Democratic individuals who have been accused of sexual misconduct, but then defend conservative men who have been accused of similar accusations. Now, Mona Charen continued her criticisms. It was kind of impressive because the audience was not on her side. They were booing her, they were yelling at her, but she went from, Donald Trump to Roy Moore, and then she moved on to criticizing CPAC itself for inviting people like Marine Le Pen on to speak. And so she was met by a security detail backstage, and they promptly escorted her out because they were concerned that her safety was in jeopardy. No one knows who asked for the security detail. She says that she didn't. But the only other person that I've read about who criticized Donald Trump during this conference was Ben Shapiro, and he was not met with the security detail, and he was not booed to the same extent. But nonetheless, the heart of the story is here is a woman who is sitting on this panel making a very credible criticism of the Republican Party, and they were having none of it. So jump in.
Yeah, so a couple things. I'm not at all surprised they're having a panel about feminism because it's Fox News 101, Conservative 101. You invite a bunch of women to crap all over other women. And you do it under the guise of feminism. And then they will often in these panels talk about real feminism is, understanding that women don't have to be equal to men. And they'll come up with all this nonsense. And the real problem are women and people who are fighting for women's rights, et cetera. Now, in this case, Mona Charen went off script. It's not that she's a liberal. They didn't invite a liberal there. She's a conservative. And she even said afterwards, she said, I don't know why they call security. And I think CPAC are still good people, very good people, right? But it's true that we have this problem where we support these guys who have credible allegations against them. But even stating something that is true at CPAC is unacceptable.
Just real quick, I really want to emphasize what you just said about Charen being conservative. She is very conservative, has written for the National Review. But what's happening at CPAC this year shows just how far the right the Trump administration has pushed the Republican Party. Because back in the day, National Review, they were the bigwigs at CPAC, right? And National Review, of course, very conservative publication. But because they have not signed on to the Trump campaign, because they criticized Trump in some of their op-ed pieces, they are now, I wouldn't say banished, but almost banished from CPAC. They went from having a large presence at these annual conferences to now having a very small, like little dark corner section of the conference, which I thought was really fascinating.
So I think the way in which you criticize Trump, I think, really matters. And oftentimes I give no credit to a lot of these conservatives because the nature of their criticism I find ridiculous. So oftentimes you see they'll decorum police him and they'll act like, you're not polite, sir. Why don't you bomb people overseas with a smile on your face and while you say pretty things? So I just find like there are so many criticisms from the left which just land and are really clear and obviously coming from a moral place. And I don't know, that like I give her credit because the audiences, they're all authoritarians and they're all sycophants and they're all brainless and that's gonna be the reaction, and she walked into a minefield there. But how much would you love it if somebody went up there and was like, Donald Trump killed an 8-year-old girl in his first military raid as president? Imagine the reaction from the audience if they did that. He raised taxes on everybody who makes $75,000 a year or less in his tax bill. See, if somebody did that, I'd say that's like real courage and they're talking about a real serious issue. But this, I feel like,
so I think context matters,
fruit,
right?
like.
So this panel was about women's issues.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Right. So if I totally agree with you,
women,
that is a legitimate criticism of Trump, and I would love to see that at any conference period, right? But in the context of this discussion, which has to do with women's issues, she is saying something that we've argued on this show on multiple occasions, that there is this double standard amongst Republicans when it comes to the issue of sexual misconduct. They will aggressively criticize Democrats or liberals who have been accused, but when it comes to their own, no, they're not having it.
Yeah, I think the biggest myth in this regard that the mainstream media puts out, and by the way, a lot of the Democrats put out, and I think it is really, really damaging, is that there is a quote unquote real Republican Party that is separate from Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump's a bad guy and he tweets bad things, but real Republicans are wonderful people that we just have honest disagreements with. So hey, real Republicans, why don't you vote for us Democrats? Oh, please, right? And the media goes along with it because for the entirety of their existence, they've been saying, he said, she said, 50-50. I can't tell because I don't know anything about news, who's right and who's wrong, which facts are actual facts and which are made up, etc. Now, in this case, Matt Schlapp, who is the chairman of the American Conservative Union that puts on CPAC, had a great quote. Not because I like him, but because this is true. He said, this idea that the Republican Party is somehow split or the conservative movement is somehow split about Trump is just not an accurate portrayal. He went on to say, indeed, more than 9 out of 10 attendees at this year's CPAC approve of the president's job performance, according to straw poll results. So no, Donald Trump is the Republican Party. And so when the whole affair, all of CPAC was with this one exception, that's why we're talking about it, because it was so different, was, oh, Trump is awesome, Trump is wonderful, and then Trump comes on and they're like, yes, Trump did a terrible, vicious speech, not against undocumented immigrants, this is really important, but against legal immigrants, all immigrants. And he called them the snake. Okay, and he read a ballad about how the snake comes in on it, and then once you invite him in, it kills you, right? And he did that about what they call chain migration, which is the heart of legal immigration in this country. And they all applauded wildly. Right. So if you think Donald Trump's a monster, and a lot of the mainstream media do paint him that way, well then you have to say that the Republican voters and all the Republican politicians who agree with him are also monsters.
Yeah, look, I think that the Republican Party was quick to denounce campaign Trump because he went against what they typically do. Look, what they like to do is trick you. Like they come in with their polite language and decorum, whatever you want to call it, but they have the same policy ideas. Yes. It's just that Trump is this like monstrous slob who comes in and says out loud what everyone in the Republican Party is thinking, but they don't want to say out loud because it won't help them with their agenda. Once Trump gets elected, that's it, game over. He wants the same policies.
And actually, the National Review, you said she's from there, right?
Yeah, she used to write for it.
She used to write for it, okay. The original disagreement from the National Review was that it was when Trump was campaigning and he was doing the populist rhetoric, their arguments against Trump were, oh my goodness, he's not for free trade. Oh my goodness, he's not for American empire. He sounds like he's going to maybe get us out of some of the wars. So that was their original disagreement with him. But to your point, ultimately, they're hand in hand. They're doing everything together because he ended up pushing for all the pro-establishment policies, and they're all pro-establishment. They are the establishment. So at the end of the day, it was just a rhetorical difference at the beginning, and now they're all the same.
Yeah, and the most frustrating part of all this, of all these different groups that are involved here, is the media. And the reason I say that is, okay, I get it. The Republicans are trying to trick you. They pretend to be progressive populists during the campaign, and then they turn around and are establishment. Okay, and Donald Trump is finally just saying it, and the voters are like, yeah, why didn't you just say it before? Yeah, we agree with you. We don't like Latinos. We don't like Muslims. And the blacks in Chicago are causing all the crime because they don't have fathers. Now finally somebody said it, right? Yep. Like, so none of those things are true, but that's what the voters, the Republicans warmed them up to that. And like with the dog whistle. So when Trump threw the dog whistle in the garbage and used a human whistle, the voters were like, yes, finally, the loathsome guy we were looking for and got trained to like. So stop pretending it isn't all Republicans. It is, it is, it is, it is. So look, I'm glad she had the courage to disagree with them on one small issue. And of course, it was met with universal disdain, because how dare you not bow your head to the authoritarian leader? If you become a member of the Young Turks, you'll be saying,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
So do it right now, tytnetwork.com/join. Get the whole Young Turks show every day.